When the internet began, bulletin board services, or BBS, became the first online communities of the so-called information superhighway. Using their phone lines, people logged in from all over America to talk about sports, games, movies, and on one BBS in particular, share their ghost stories. Over time, those communities all went dark, except for one lone server that continues to operate somewhere in an unknown part of Pennsylvania's Rust Belt. A relic of the 1990s, veiled in mystery, it is a digital archive of humanity's strangest encounters with the unknown, as told by the people who experienced them. My name is Brandon Schexnayder, and you are listening to Fear Daily.
Subject, overnight. User, look 17 not. Posted, October 21st, 1998.
At night, the church's community center did not feel like the same place where we had spaghetti suppers and craft fairs. Without the chatter of parents and kids, the building sat too still. The linoleum floors squeaked like it was complaining you were there. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, and when they flickered, the shadows pooled in the corners as if they had somewhere else to be. So when they said we'd be spending Halloween locked inside until sunrise, I couldn't shake the feeling we were poking at something we shouldn't. My mom told me it was safe, supervised, the right place to be on a night like that, but the longer I stood in that echoing gym, the less safe it felt. Like the walls themselves were waiting for the lights to go out. I didn't want to go to that lock-in. She made me, said it'd keep me out of mischief, said I'd thank her later, but that night was nothing but mischief, and worse. The youth group had been hyping it up all month long. Pizza, games, movies, staying up all night. 30 kids crammed into the building next to the church, the one with the basketball court and meeting rooms. Brother Dan, our youth pastor, strutted around in his tucked-in polo shirt and Reeboks, carrying a megaphone like he was in charge of a summer camp instead of a bunch of restless teenagers. By 10 o'clock, it was chaos. Somebody cranked the stereo. Kids were wrestling on the mats. Girls were daring each other to chug raw eggs in the kitchen. Out back, a few of the older guys smoked weed, even though the rule was you couldn't leave. Brother Dan pretended not to notice. Then, Joey Carmichael said the words that wrecked the whole night. Let's play Bloody Mary. Of course, it was Joey's greasy mullet, denim jacket full of band patches nobody recognized. He was obsessed with UFOs, cults, Ouija boards. Half the younger kids followed him like he was the real youth pastor, and the girls squealed and acted like they were scared. The guys tried to look tough, and me, I didn't want anything to do with it, but you don't want to look like a coward either. So all 30 of us crowded into the women's restroom, the one with the long mirror over the sinks. Joey killed the lights. Only the red exit sign glowed. Bloody Mary, Bloody Mary, Bloody Mary, we chanted. At first, nothing. Then, the mirror fogged up, even though the sinks were dry. A handprint pressed against the glass from the other side, fingers too long, bending wrong, a smear dragged downward like nails scraping. Someone screamed. A girl pushed for the door. Brother Dan stormed in with his flashlight, shouting that we were inviting demons. He broke it up and made us line up in the gym for a prayer circle, but the mirror stayed fogged. When his light swept across it, I swear I saw something leaning just behind our reflections. And that was when the basement door rattled. The community center had a basement, but it was always locked. We weren't supposed to go down there. Kids whispered about it during Sunday school. Old daycare toys, or worse, the storage for coffins when the funeral home flooded. They were just rumors, but that night, after the Bloody Mary stunt, the knob jiggled and the door cracked open. Blackness yawned down the stairwell. Brother Dan slammed it shut and fumbled with the lock. His hands were shaking. The smart move at that point would have been to call parents, shut it all down, and send us home. Instead, he wanted to prove he was in control. So he herded us back into the gym, blasted Jesus Freak on the stereo, and told us to play basketball until we forgot. Well, we didn't forget. Around midnight, the power cut out. The whole building went black. Screams rose up, sneakers squeaked across the floor, somebody spilled a soda can, and it hissed like a snake. And then came the sound. Chains dragging, slow and heavy from beneath the gym floor. Brother Dan tried to pray over it, but his voice cracked. The dragging grew louder, closer, boards creaking, nails popping, and then humming, low and funeral slow, seeped up through the floor. Kids panicked. They ran for the doors, locked every one of them. When the emergency lights flicked on, we saw it. Standing at center court was a figure in a white church robe, dripping wet, crimson stains spreading across the fabric. Its face was hidden behind a cracked porcelain mask, painted with a smile that didn't move. In its hand swung a rusted chain with a hook at the end. It stepped forward. Marcus tried to swing a folding chair, but the chain lashed out, hooked his chest, yanked him screaming into the dark, and Lisa ran for the bathroom, but she never came back. When the exit sign flickered, I swear I saw the thing dragging her by the hair down the basement stairs. I dove under the bleachers, heart thudding, praying it hadn't seen me. From the shadows, I watched it stalk the gym, the chain scraping the floor. It wasn't in a hurry and didn't need to be. One by one, the screams died out. I don't remember how long I stayed hidden. It could have been minutes, could have been hours. My Walkman was crushed against my chest, Metallica's One looping in my head, only out of tune, warped like someone humming it through broken teeth. When I crawled out, the gym was empty, silent, just pizza boxes scattered, soda pooling across the floor like blood. The basement door stood wide open. I crept closer, and from the top of the stairs, I heard voices. Kids crying, whispering prayers, calling for their moms, and then that humming again, louder now, echoing up the stairwell. I couldn't go down. I ran instead. By some miracle, one of the back doors wasn't locked anymore. I shoved it open, cold October air hitting me like a slap, and I ran across the lot, past the empty swings, all the way home without looking back. The next morning, the news said nothing. Parents picked up their kids like everything was fine, and Brother Dan smiled in Sunday service, acting like nothing had happened. The basement door was bolted shut.
Subject: a little witch Hazel. User, John Doe 99. Posted, October 12, 1999.
When Tyler started complaining about the itch on his shoulder, we told him it was just a bug bite. It was the time of year spiders started coming inside, I said, so he probably rolled over on one in his sleep and it had taken exception. A little witch hazel on that, baby, twice a day, and you'll be fine in a week, I said. He came to bowling the next week still poking at that same patch on his shoulder, and I asked if he'd followed my instructions. He said he had, but in that way boys do when they think you can't tell they're bullshitting. God damn it, Tyler, put some witch hazel on that thing and stop fussing with it. You're gonna get an infection. He nodded vaguely and stood up to take his turn. I watched him pick up the ball, saw how he was trying to keep his left shoulder still so the bite wouldn't rub against his t-shirt, and sighed. He rolled a strike, so I figured it couldn't be all that bad. The following week, there was that awful bombing at the federal building over in Oklahoma City, so Benny, the owner of Bowlaway, decided to cancel that week's league games out of respect. Consequently, it was another 7 days before I saw Tyler again, and he wasn't looking great. He'd never been an outdoorsy guy, so you didn't expect to see him tanned, but that night, he was paler than I'd ever seen him. His shirt was loose and billowy, but when it settled just right, I could see that a lump had grown up on his bitten shoulder. Even if I hadn't seen that, he was so obviously favoring his left side that he couldn't throw the ball hard enough down the lane to knock over one pin, let alone 10. Tyler, I said, what's going on with that shoulder, baby? Have you done anything I've told you to do? He looked at me sheepishly, beads of sweat forming on his forehead. He chuckled, then winced. Nah, I've been busy, but I'm gonna do that. It's been getting worse. I took a sip of my beer and held the can against my mouth to muffle a burp. You want me to take a look? I'm no doctor, but I know my bug bites. He looked both relieved and apprehensive, like he was happy someone wanted to help him, but also concerned at what I might say. I popped up from my side and walked over to him, carefully pulling his shirt away from his back just far enough I could see the bite. Jesus, I said before I could stop myself. What is it? Panic in his voice was hard to ignore, and so was the situation on his shoulder. Is it bad? Like I said, I know bug bites. I grew up half outside looking at bugs and half inside learning about them. While I'm no expert, I'm pretty good at assessing them, and this thing had zoomed past bad without bothering to stop for gas. The part of it sitting above the skin was easily the size of a golf ball and dimpled in a similar way, but instead of white, it was an ugly shade of pus yellow. I couldn't be sure, but it looked as if it was throbbing too, keeping time with his heartbeat. Not to brag, but I have a stronger stomach than almost anyone I've ever met, and this was hands down the most upsetting thing I've ever seen. He was sweating, which made the dimples glisten when the overheads of the bowling alley hit them and exposed a tiny black dot in the center of each one. I didn't want to get any closer than necessary, but as I was about to pull back, I caught a whiff of something. Dipping just a few inches closer to Tyler's shoulder, I took another sniff, and sure enough, it was coming from the bite. It smelled like rotting meat. I recoiled, putting several feet between me and my friend. Tyler, you need to see a doctor. He started stuttering, trying to form an objection. But you said a little witch hazel would do the trick. That was before, man. Whatever that is, witch hazel can't fix it. You need to have it checked out and lanced. You're probably gonna need antibiotics too. Jesus, dude, what bit you? I don't know, he said in a desperate whine. Well, Whatever it was, get that checked out. Maybe even go to the ER tonight. If you leave that thing any longer, it could go septic, and then you're really going to be in trouble. Will you do that, please?" He said he would, then excused himself from the game. The last time I saw him, he was walking out the door a bowl away, headed to his car. Tyler didn't come to the next game or the one after that. No one seemed to know what had happened to him, and there wasn't any real consensus on the last time they'd spoken to him. Tyler had been part of the friend group for longer than I had, but he hadn't really matured alongside everyone, and they weren't exactly upset when he didn't come to things. The motto seemed to be, if Tyler doesn't call you, don't call him. He wasn't my favorite person, but I felt bad no one had bothered to check up on him. I couldn't stop thinking about that bite and the ugly way it had pulsed. Bile rose up in my throat. "Guys," I said at the conclusion of the next frame, "it's kind of fucked up that no one has talked to him. I know he sucks, but what if that infection on his shoulder has gotten worse? We should at least stop by before we go to the bar." The group grumbled and groused, but in the end they agreed, and after the second game we drove over to Tyler's place. We never got those beers. Tyler lived in a little A-frame house that his grandparents had left him. It was on a double lot on a quiet side street, set far enough apart from his neighbors that his stereo system couldn't annoy anyone too much. As we pulled up to the curb, I saw that the lights in Tyler's front room were on, which seemed like a good sign. Opening the car door, I listened for the telltale signs of him being home. Usually a movie rental or Allman Brothers album playing at top volume, but it was dead silent. You could have heard a pin drop. It was dark, but Tyler's lawn looked shaggy and unkempt, as if he hadn't cut it in weeks. He wasn't exactly fastidious about these things, but this was a new level even for him. Closer to the house, the interior lights cast wan pools on the nearest parts of the lawn, and I saw that it wasn't just unkempt, but there was a fine fuzz over top of it, like mold on an old tub of yogurt. It seemed to be radiating out from the house, extending halfway into the glow. One of the others saw the mold-like fuzz and tapped out, saying they would wait for us back at the car. They were the smartest person there. Tyler's front door was locked, so I called his name. No response. The others did the same, all their voices together loud enough to wake, if not the dead, at least his neighbors. Still, nothing. I tried banging on the door, and that's when it went bad. Instead of colliding with the hard wood, my fist met a soggy mass with the texture of wet bread and went right through it. Never in my life had I made a sound like I did then, a mixture of surprise and disgust. Worse, when my hand was through the door, I felt something skitter across it in the dark on the other side. I ripped my arm back and checked my hand to confirm there were no cuts or bites. The whole thing raised a clamor among the friends still left at the door, and we were trying to process it when one of them screamed. Something was crawling across the inside of the window, casting a massive shadow onto the fuzzy lawn. It looked vaguely spider-like, but not similar to any spider I could think of, at least not one native to our state. The first spider was joined by a second, then a third, fourth, and fifth. We all screamed like hell and ran back to the car, peeling out there with a screech. After several minutes of panic-filled babbling, we calmed down enough for one of the others to suggest we go to the police. Whatever was happening to Tyler was bigger than we could handle. In fact, we never found out exactly what it was that happened. Police officers who performed the welfare check in response to our report wouldn't get any closer to the house than halfway down the sidewalk. From what I heard, the Moldy overgrowth of the lawn had spread even further, and beneath it, things could be heard moving in the grass. In the end, it was a biohazard team from the city that had to go into Tyler's place. You won't read this in the papers, but that county biohazard team also was responsible for razing the house to the ground. My cousin Andy works for the fire service, and he told me that they were informed a controlled urban burn would be happening and advised the department not to interfere. Bowling took a back seat for a few weeks as we all tried to process what had happened. The state team had not only burned Tyler's house to the ground, but had taken all the materials with them, along with the first 3 feet of topsoil. 2 years later, and that property is still sitting vacant, like a socket missing its tooth. You know what haunts me most about all this? We never really found out exactly what happened to our friend. We knew he was dead, but not how. And all the police would tell us was that his remains were found in the bathroom, right next to a broken hand mirror and a bottle of witch hazel.
Fear Daily is an independent podcast hosted by Brandon Schexnayder and written by Brennan Storr, with Joanna Smith serving as the consulting editor, audio production by Rachel Boyd, and sound design by Southern Gothic Media. This podcast is a work of fiction. Names, characters, places, and incidents are either products of the author's imagination or are used fictitiously. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, or to real events or locations, is entirely coincidental. Ad-free versions of Fear Daily are available now on your favorite podcast apps. For more information, visit feardaily.com. But move fast, before the server goes offline.